On November 13th, 4 Idaho University students were stabbed to death while sleeping in a home that they shared in a college town of Moscow. The home was located just off campus and was actually a very large house, being 3 stories tall. 2 of the students were actually killed on the 2nd floor of the house, 2 on the 3rd, while an additional 2 students were unharmed while they were sleeping on the 1st floor. Very little has actually been made public about the case from law enforcement outside of the fact that 2 of the students, Ethan and Xana, attended a party earlier in the evening, while Maddie and Kaylee spent the evening at a bar called the Corner Club. After leaving that bar, they stopped at a food truck, and that food truck was apparently doing a live stream at the time, and Maddie and Kaylee were caught on video when they ordered their food.
Police say the search for a suspect continues and people should look out for each other. Meantime, we found this video from a Moscow food truck that's from early Sunday morning. It shows 2 of the students, Kaylee and Maddie, ordering food around 1:40 a.m. This is one of the last times they were seen. Moscow police say this video is helping investigators recreate a timeline of events from that night.
And it has helped. It gives us a time and space where we know that 2 of our victims were, and that helps us a ton, and we'll continue to follow up all leads that we can.
The family of Kaylee Gonsalves have seen the video and agreed to let us publish it. They identified Maddie Mogan wearing the long black jacket and Kaylee, who is with her, in the white sweatshirt.
It's normally a place where everyone feels really safe.
Joseph Woodall is the manager of the grub truck. He is seen in the video working the cash register, taking the girl's order. This afternoon, he described their interaction with me.
One of the blondes was just a little bit more cheery and kind of bouncing around a little bit more, and then one was like standing there and doing the hello, how are you, and goes through the interactions. And normally, that's pretty normal. In most of our groups, there's people that are more energetic and people that are managing the energetic people.
Joseph told me he felt incredibly sad when he learned the news about the girls he had just seen the other night.
Hope they find the person. Hope they get the person.
In the video, they seem happy. Nothing appeared to be wrong at the time, and as far as I've been able to find online, this is the last recorded image of the students just before their murders. Now, information regarding their movements and the time that they actually arrived home seems to vary a little bit from source to source, but it seems to be fairly universally accepted that the 2 students who were sleeping downstairs were home sometime roughly around 1 in the morning, while the other 4 remaining students who were asleep upstairs and murdered arrived home roughly before 2 in the morning.
Late Friday night, police released a revised timeline in the movements of 2 of the victims prior to their deaths, saying Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogan returned home at 1:56 a.m. and not 1:45 a.m. as previously reported. The update followed the submission of more than 260 photos and videos by the public.
I originally recorded a different section of this video. However, new information has come to light that has dramatically changed the timeline of events. Honestly, it's happened quite a few times with this video, which I thought I would have had done days ago, but more and more information just keeps coming out. So this video is gonna seem a lot choppier than my normal videos in an attempt to include all of that new information. For example, up until recently, the narrative surrounding how the bodies were found was, to put it mildly, bizarre. Basically, it was being suggested online that one of the roommates had actually found the bodies, and at some point they called 911 and reported an unconscious person. Which, I mean, well, it makes absolutely no sense. In the original video, I speculated that maybe one of the bodies had been moved or staged in some way, because I highly doubt that any rational person would find a stabbing victim covered in blood in a bloody crime scene and conclude that they had passed out. However, recently someone connected to the roommates posted online that the unconscious person reported to 911 was actually one of the surviving roommates. After she had discovered the body, she'd ran out of the house screaming where she passed out from shock. A passerby had actually seen this happen, and they were the person who called 911 and reported an unconscious person in the front yard. To make matters worse, when emergency services actually arrived, they went into the house not realizing it was a crime scene. The post also mentions that there was a sliding glass door open on the 2nd floor, and later in this video, I actually go on to suggest that the killer might have entered through the 2nd floor, but the part of the house that I suggested was the front of the house, whereas the 2nd floor sliding glass door is actually located at the rear of the home. That's not saying that the killer necessarily entered or exited through that door, I'm just reporting what was posted online. Finally, later in this video, I discuss how law enforcement have suggested that they believe the murders were actually targeted. Now, there is a lot to that. I'm going to play a video clip here shortly about that, but I mean, it's been back and forth on that. So one moment they're saying that someone was targeted, then it was the house was targeted, then they don't know if anyone was targeted. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to discuss this case because the information is changing from 1 minute to the next.
They should be able to get information that will take them to a suspect, simply because the suspect, while he was stealthful getting into the to the house, he left a very messy crime scene. It's more than likely he left his DNA, so that's where the answers are going to be.
Police have stated that there weren't any signs of a forced entry, that they didn't find the murder weapon, and that the murders appeared to be targeted. Were one of the roommates talking to someone? Was there something left at the crime scene? Again, maybe a body was staged. There's just so much up in the air, but why would they use the word targeted?
The notion that the killer may have been at that vigil and that there more than likely were investigators watching the people who were there. I want to get back to the breaking news of what the prosecutor has now told a local TV station, that in fact there was one person targeted. When yesterday he said targeted isn't maybe even the right word. We should really back off that. It's more the house itself. I am thoroughly confused what's going on.
I'm confused too, and I've got some breaking news that's going to help clear this up. You're confused because of what we reported yesterday. We interviewed the prosecutor. He said that one of the victims was not targeted, that the residence was targeted, and then today said something totally different to a different reporter. We've been trying to figure it out, and I just got an email from the police department saying that this has been an internal miscommunication. And I want to read this to you, actually listen to it carefully. This is a quote now by the prosecutor. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. We want to let you know that there was a miscommunication between detectives and my office. To clarify, investigators do not believe the murders were random, but we cannot unequivocally state the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted. I apologize for any confusion." And then it goes on to say in big, bold letters, "Correction. Conflicting information has been released over the past 24 hours. The prosecutor's office stated the suspect specifically looked at the residence and that one or more of the occupants were undoubtedly targeted. We have spoken with the prosecutor's office and identified that was a miscommunication. Detectives do not currently know if the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted, but continue to investigate." I mean, what a mess this is, Ashley. But they are saying this is now an internal miscommunication here.
I mean, this is absurd. This is absurd. This is serious business. There are families grieving. There are students and teachers and administrators and locals in Moscow who are terrified about this person who's out there. And we have been meant to, trust the police information that there's no huge risk to the public, that there's a targeted attack. But then we really don't know if that is so reliable, because just within the span of 24 hours, two entirely different stories. So I think this is just extraordinarily, upsetting and confusing. And, this is serious business, what's happening. These people are afraid and they have the right, to appropriate information.
Somehow, after these 4 young adults returned home and went to sleep, someone managed to make a non-forced entry into the home, or potentially maybe they already made entry into the home before anyone had gotten home. The 2 surviving roommates, who have since been cleared, hadn't returned home until 1 o'clock, as I mentioned previously, so it's a big house, and it's entirely possible the killer may have already been inside the home. Law enforcement have also claimed that they believe that only one knife was involved in the murders, a fixed-blade, K-bar, military-style type knife. And, I mean, on the surface, that would at least suggest that only one killer was involved. Either way, that killer was able to murder 4 different people with a knife, all while not waking anyone else up in the house. It just seems so impossible to me. I mean, obviously it's possible, but whoever did this, they most likely were very physically strong, probably young, or perhaps maybe they had knowledge of anatomy to be able to kill someone so quietly. You could make an argument that killing one person quietly is a coincidence, but 4 people, all dying and none of them making a noise to wake up the girls in the downstairs is just, I don't know, it's just very difficult to believe. And it only gets more difficult because the more and more you look into the case, the stranger and stranger all of this becomes.
Was this dog butchered by the same person who slaughtered the 4 college students? Buddy, a mini Australian shepherd, was found skinned and mutilated 3 weeks before the murders.
Let's start with possibly one of the most strange details of the case, because apparently prior to the murder, someone actually killed and skinned the neighbor's dog, which I think we can all agree is not normal. In my entire life, I have never known a single person who had something like that happen, and the fact that it happened right next to a quadruple homicide, I don't know, seems a bit sus. To make things even weirder, police recently came out and told the public that the dog, being filleted next door was somehow apparently unrelated. So yeah, it was just your everyday, ordinary skinned dog next door. Then, after looking over some of the pictures from the home, things only managed to get weirder. The sliding glass door on the first floor of the home was blocked off with this chair, and unless law enforcement put that chair there, it would have prevented entry into the home. This coincidentally just so happened to be the same floor that the roommates who were unharmed were actually asleep on. I have a very strong feeling that those girls had most likely locked their bedroom doors that night and almost certainly are lucky to be alive. However, the second floor had a small ledge outside the window, and right below that ledge, there just so happens to be a ladder. Now, this ladder might be completely unrelated to the crime, and you could even make an argument that this ladder came from law enforcement and not the home. But if that's the case, I would ask why law enforcement felt the need to put a ladder next to that ledge in the first place. I think that this ledge is a very likely entry point into the home. The debris on the ledge seems to be disturbed, cleaner near the end, almost as if someone had pulled themselves up to that location. However, there is another possibility, because apparently there was a keypad access code to enter the house, so it's entirely possible that the killer knew the code and was able to gain entry that way, which if that is in fact the case, it would go a long way to explain why law enforcement believe the murders were targeted. Law enforcement have been very guarded about why they believe the murders were targeted, and they haven't released what caused them to believe this, but more on that later. Either way, I think there's a real chance that whoever did this may have either been watching the home or had physically been inside of the home at some point. The house was apparently known as kind of a party house. So someone scoping out security measures and the best ways to enter the house could have easily gone unnoticed during a party. But the concept of the killer being a random college student does seem to be challenged when you consider that law enforcement have apparently been speaking with investigators in Washington and Oregon regarding 2 different cases that may have apparently been related. Again, there's nothing that's been released that would confirm that these other cases are related, but I would be lying if I said I didn't think it was entirely possible, because the moment I heard about this case, it instantly made me think of another case, a much older one.
We had gone to bed. I don't recall what it was that stirred me. I just, for whatever reason, went immediately to Lisa's room and opened the door and went in. There, she was covered in blood. She was absolutely covered in blood, and she was moaning. And I, reached out to her, and she was touching her mouth. And to this day, I have that memory of her.
4 young women were beaten with a club, and 2 of them were strangled to death last night by a man who found his victims sleeping in this sorority house on the Tallahassee campus of Florida State University. A man was seen leaving the house with a club.
I still have the image in my mind, and I still, care for her deeply, and I just wish I could have done something.
The killer came in from the night and then returned to it with an ease that has so far baffled police and left most co-eds here terrified. He clubbed and then strangled to death 20-year-old Lisa Levy and 21-year-old Margaret Bowman. At least one of them was raped. Then he brutally beat 3 more sleeping co-eds, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner. Cheryl Ann Thomas was severely beaten in her apartment 6 blocks away.
Well, I think there was this thought that as long as you didn't do harm to another or put yourself in a bad situation, that you could not be harmed. And in fact, these were totally innocent women that were, unjustly attacked, and 2 lives were taken.
I always took my newspaper on my morning break, and when I was reading the paper, I saw this photograph of a young woman peering out from behind a curtain at the Chi Omega sorority house in Florida. And I had this really bad feeling that it might be the work of Ted.
Investigators suggesting that one of the people possibly was targeted in the home does seem to kind of challenge the idea of a Ted Bundy-type killer, but not all serial killers work in a random way. BTK, for example, would sometimes stalk his victims for months, learning their habits. He kept detailed notes on their movements, and ironically, one of the girls killed in Idaho, named Kaylee Gonzaga, had apparently told some of her friends that she felt like she had been being stalked. However, not long after that information came to light, police came out with a statement that they haven't been able to substantiate the stalking claims. But if this person really was a BTK-type stalker and murderer, I would imagine that stalking claims with someone like that would be nearly impossible to follow up on.
The fear in the community is going to grow, and not just because of the rumors. This case is so dreadful, and it's so concerning that people really are frightened.
In the end, this case has national attention, and I have no doubt law enforcement are leaving no stone unturned. I think it's reasonable to assume that police have checked cell tower data and questioned anyone that was near the home on the night of the murders. So either the killer had their phone on them and they've somehow been able to elude police, or they had enough foresight to not bring a phone with them. However, I think it's fairly unlikely the police have interviewed the killer, mostly because Ethan, the young man who was killed, was a very physically fit former athlete. Homicides that involve knives often injure the attacker, especially the attacker's hands.
Here again to field some of those questions is my News Nation colleague, Brian Enton. And Brian, I want to start, if I can, with Cassandra, who asks on Twitter, has the investigation checked all of the ERs and the urgent care centers for a suspect looking for possible treatment? Also, check local pharmacies for someone buying items to cover their wounds. It's a good question.
It is a good question. I would imagine so. You know, that's something that several students brought up to me on campus today. We were talking about who the killer could possibly be, and they asked me, could this person be injured? Could they be laying low somewhere? I mean, we know this was a brutal killing, stabbing of 4 people, that some of those victims may have fought back. So it's certainly something very, very possible. It's a good question.
Police have also suggested that Xana, who was Ethan's girlfriend, had signs that she'd tried to fight her attacker, which is exactly why I don't think law enforcement have interviewed the killer. Anyone, absolutely anyone that has injuries to their hands, or really anywhere for that matter, I have no doubt law enforcement would have been all over them. The concept of Xana being the one who actually seems to have fought the most does make sense if you consider that most likely the killer attacked Ethan first while he was asleep, which woke up Xana, at which point a fight ensued. The more and more I consider this case, the murders of specifically Ethan and Xana are what stand out to me the most. If the killer was targeting one of the other girls in the home, why risk attacking 2 people at the same time, one of which was an athletic, larger guy? I mean, it could mean nothing. It was just a really risky move.
Police said it appeared to be a targeted attack, but did not explain why. Moscow police have also been saying that they do not believe there is an ongoing threat to the community. But today, the tone changed.
Initially, police stated that they didn't believe the public was in danger. However, as the investigation continued, police eventually walked that claim back and asked the public to be vigilant and aware of their surroundings. Students are refusing to return to class, parents don't want their kids on campus, professors are calling for online classes to be held until someone's arrested, but as of the moment of this video's creation, no one has been named as a suspect by law enforcement, and hopefully that changes soon. Hopefully law enforcement are able to find this guy before someone else gets hurt or even more people get killed. Anyone capable of what this guy did is capable of just about anything. And until this person is caught, I truly don't believe enough precautions can be taken. If you live in or near Moscow, Idaho, please try to stay safe. And if you have any information that you think might be helpful, anything at all to the investigation, you can call the tip line that's linked in the description of this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching.